I just happened to see a comment on my Facebook page, somebody saying that Tim Kaine is this year's Howard Dean. Uh, Gee, I don't know which one is more insulted by that. I met Howard Dean many, many years ago, and I can tell you he's a little out of sorts as far as that goes. It's not so much that he's a flaming liberal and an apologist for a lot of bad government policy, but it's the fact that he pretty much blows whichever way the wind blows. And as he was my governor when I lived in Vermont, I just didn't have a whole lot of respect for him. When it comes to Tim Kaine, I'm also seeing people who are talking about his performance last night, even liberals. Well, it depends on who you talk to. If you're one of those Democrats who just has to constantly toe the party line, then you're going to say, oh, Tim Kaine was the winner. And I'm judging this by people I know on Facebook who are Democrats. And I saw their comments during and after the debate last night. Oh, Kaine's really giving it to him. And all the Republicans I know on Facebook said, oh, Pence is really giving it to him. It's like going to a football game. And after the game, you go over and you say to, let's say Buell and Filer are playing, right? You go over to the Filer sideline and you say, how was the refereeing? Oh, they certainly clearly favored Buell. And if you go over to the Buell sideline, they'll tell you they clearly favored Filer. But I'm throwing that out there just as an example. I don't know much about their football teams. Let me just put it that way. But so. Oh, Bill, I don't want to talk about their football programs. Okay, we're talking about the debate. And so I want to stick with that, but I'm just using that as what it's called an analogy. You liberals out there, you may not be able to understand that because of your public school education or the fact that you don't have what I'd call an ability to think beyond that linear line. The thing is, I can accept those. I know people are being partisan when they're on their Facebook pages. But a fellow by the name of Chris Aliza at the Washington Post, who's a flaming liberal, says this morning, he said, if there was a winner, it clearly was Kaine. And he said, I don't know who would, or not Kaine rather, but Pence. He said, I don't know who advised Kaine to shout and interrupt all the time, but he said it certainly looked bad, and he said it made the debate basically unwatchable. So Aliza, it's his job to follow politics at the Washington Post, sometimes known as Pravda on the Potomac, he claims he switched over and watched the end of the baseball game, which truly was very exciting and a tremendous finish. But it's difficult to sell the American public who are not necessarily right now. You've got your core Clinton supporters and your core Trump supporters, and these people are not going to be moved. There's really only about 10% of that voting population in the middle that can be swayed at this point. Last night, and these are people who I would call, they're not the people who sit around and listen to talk radio or are online reading about politics or watching their favorite cable news network. They're people who have a lot of other things going on in their lives, unlike me. They have a lot of other things going on in their lives, so they casually pay attention to politics. But one of the reasons they don't get serious about it is because they see events like last night, and they do think it's a clown show. And Kaine is dressed up in one meme this morning as one of those crazy clowns that is supposedly terrorizing the country. 10 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX at newsradio1310.com. Here's a point I wanted to make. Did Pence ever get an opportunity between being interrupted by was it Elaine Quijano? Was that her name? Quijano is her last name. She's of Philippine descent. She was the moderator or the main person doing all of the what do you call it? She was the inquisitor. Let's put it that way. There were a lot of jokes on Twitter last night about how good looking she is, and some guy on Twitter even said if Trump had been there, he'd already be hitting on her. And that would at least make it more entertaining than it happened to be. But take a listen as Kaine tries to speak here, and you wonder, was this part of the design?
Senator, if your son or my son handled classified information the way Hillary Clinton did, they'd be court-martialed.
That is absolutely false, and you know that.
Absolutely
and you know
true.
that, Governor.
It's absolutely true.
Because the FBI did an investigation.
Gentlemen.
So what Pence was trying to point out was when it came to Clinton violating all of our laws and in national security and giving state secrets away to the Chinese and Russians and WikiLeaks and Guccifer and all of these other people around the world who were actually collecting all of her email traffic because of her homebrew server. If that had been somebody in the military, they would have already been locked up in prison. In fact, there is a story about that. A guy serving on a Navy sub took 6 photographs of an engine in his sub that was classified, and he ended up going to prison for a year. David Petraeus had a book thrown at him, too, as well. While he didn't serve any time behind bars, same idea. But Kaine couldn't get, or rather Pence couldn't get that out. And I'm sorry, I apologize to Mike Pence for confusing him with a crazy clown this morning on a couple of occasions. But he couldn't get that point out last night because he had two people talking over him the entire night, which, again, was that by design. Kaine, meanwhile, is claiming that the Obama Justice Department wasn't being political when it came to excusing Hillary Clinton's bad behavior on emails.
Not one reasonable prosecutor would take any additional step. You don't get to decide the rights and wrongs of this. We have a justice system that does that.
Reasonable prosecutor? No, that's an objective statement. That means, in other words, he believes that. But there are a lot of reasonable prosecutors. One of them, by the name of Grant Loebs, sat here in the studio a few weeks ago and basically said the same thing. A lot of prosecutors would have gone ahead and filed charges against Hillary Clinton or sought an indictment. The FBI didn't bother. It started giving immunity or discounting testimony from any of her aides just to get the result that it had been told to get by the White House. So to sit here and say reasonable, well, calling any Democrat reasonable is likely a bit of an oxymoron. The whole thing, it seems to me it was an exercise in other words, they had to fill the time. We didn't even have a vice presidential debate. The first one was in 1976. There wasn't one in 1980. And I don't think anybody cares who the vice president is. Nobody's going to the polls saying, well, I'm voting for Mike Pence or I'm voting for Tim Kaine. It's Trump or Hillary. And we didn't even have modern debates. We talk about Lincoln Douglas. That was not a presidential debate. They were debating for the U.S. Senate in 1858. The first big presidential debate for television and radio was 1960. These are all recent things that we're experiencing, and none of them, they're all about perceptions. He's got a lot of growth on his face. He needs to shave more closely. I guess I'll not vote for him. Sure, he may be the best person to reduce the debt and protect the United States, but golly gee, I just don't like his looks. And that's what we've got in this modern era. No wonder the country is in such a mess. Kaine, by the way, wanted to tell everybody who could listen that Donald Trump is a meanie.
If you want to have a society where people are respected and respect laws, you can't have somebody at the top who demeans every group that he talks about. And I cannot believe that Governor Pence will defend the insult-driven campaign that Donald Trump has run.
So we got a country $20 trillion in debt. And Donald Trump called a fat girl back in 1996, and that's the big issue? The fat girl, by the way, who was a suspect in a murder case, at least an accomplice driving the killer away, and who also may have been the model for a drug gang leader. She is being celebrated as a victim and being a hero by the Clinton campaign, even though she has a sordid criminal background. and media eats it up. Media amplifies that. How can you trust these devious people any longer? I know that's the subject of this program a great many days, but I think we have to continue to hammer that home. There was a letter writer to the newspaper last week. They're still upset because I am intruding on their liberal space. That is the liberals who actually read the paper. They are upset. They were talking about toxic talk radio. In other words, somebody who's pulling the curtain back and letting you see how this mess really works. That's what they're upset about, folks. They can't stand that somebody's on the radio. And I'm not running for anything. I don't even make any laws, and I don't enforce any laws. But the fact that somebody is saying, hey, wait a minute, the emperor has no clothes, infuriates them. Does anyone, by the way, anymore get influenced by name-calling in politics? I mean, come on, I don't really believe it even. It's all just white noise any longer.
If Donald Trump had said all the things that you said he said, in the way you said he said them, he still wouldn't have a fraction of the insults that Hillary Clinton leveled when she said that half of our supporters were a basket of deplorables.
I apologize because I said white noise, and I could have said brown noise or black noise, and I don't want you to feel that I am leaving you out, so we'll just say all color noise. Maybe that should be the better way to do it, although white would be the absence of all colors, so I suppose I'm leaving out my own kind. However, the thing is, most of the Democrats, when they hear a Trump supporter, they do think you're deplorable. And I think that most Democrats are skunks. So, again, does calling anybody a name any longer really have any impact? I don't think so. I think it's become irrelevant. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And a big thank you for joining us this morning. I know you could be doing many other things like taking out the trash or raking leaves. But, I do think at the moment this is far more important. Kaine claims, by the way, that Hillary is going to be taking on terrorists. She's going to flex her muscles. She's going to do her best impersonation of Barack Obama, of course, who's got ISIS and Vladimir Putin and all of these people running scared.
Hillary and I want to do enforcement based on, are people dangerous? These guys say all Mexicans are bad. And with respect to refugees, we want to keep people out if they're dangerous. Donald Trump said keep them out if they're Muslim.
Trump said some of them are good people when he was referring to the fact that we are importing some criminals to this country. But then you look at the killer of Kate Steinle and you go, aha, that's proof of that. I was looking at this morning's Times News, by the way, and also our own website here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We have a story at our website about a group of alleged criminals. We'll say alleged at this point because they haven't had their day in court yet. A stolen pickup truck, and they got pulled over by sheriff's deputies, Twin Falls County sheriff's deputies. And then one of these guys, he was on an ATV. He ran off into a field, and they used a drone to track him down. Good for the drone, I guess, in this particular case. They tracked him down to the field, and he was arrested. All of the people involved have Latino names. And then over in the Times News, it says Declo man charged in fatal crash. Guess what? He's got a Latino name. Here's another one. Girlfriend pleads guilty in Tigra Martinez robbery. Or Tig maybe is the way it's pronounced. But I'm telling you, does that mean that Latinos are coming here and causing all of our crime? Absolutely not. No one is implying that. And in fact, if you look through the crime listings on our website and in the newspaper, you'll find that most of the people who are committing crimes in the Magic Valley are still named Smith or Jones. In other words, they're Anglo, as they might be described by the Latinos. We're all Anglos. They lump us all together. That's not bigoted, by the way, calling you an Anglo, even if your ancestry is Polish or Italian or German. And I understand that. But on the other hand, whenever I read these stories, the first thing that pops into my mind, because it's never mentioned, are those people here legally or illegally? We can't get answers to any of this stuff anymore. Mike Pence, by the way, was not completely conservative last night. He did throw a bone to Lefty.
The bad-mouthing that comes from people that seize upon tragedy in the wake of police action shootings as a reason to use a broad brush to accuse law enforcement of implicit bias or institutional racism, and that really has got to stop.
That's got to stop. But he's also a guy who's been saying, well, yeah, there might be some truth to this. Most of the people who are killed by police officers are dope dealers and rapists and murderers themselves. And yet somehow they get celebrated as being martyrs. I'm sorry, but this country is going to hell in a handbasket, and somebody's got to put it back together. We've got more on this subject coming up in a couple of minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on KLIX. Dr. Jonathan Tripp should be joining us in a few minutes from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls. Just wanted to mention his visit. Also wanted to mention, too, he likes to point out, you got to say often. You can't say always, but often they can see you on the very same day. If you're one of the patients at his practice and you wake up in the morning and you've got an issue, medical issue, they can generally see you on the same day. Generally being the operative word. Also, his office is still looking for new patients, and they could be found on Fillmore Street directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. And this morning we're going to be talking with him about symptoms of heart attacks. These are different in men and women, and how you can go about identifying those. You could have my experience yesterday while I was shopping at a local grocery store. Maybe I'll talk about that a little later in the program. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Bill, I think Huckabee summed it up pretty well after the debate analysis that Kaine went away hungry and this Pence had eaten his lunch. And I thought, but Pence, my gosh, this guy's tied right in with the radical Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, he's right in bed with what Hillary and Obama believe for sure. And I thought it was interesting last night. They used two of the Alinsky techniques. One was to basically demonize the opposition and, the interruptions and so forth, the lies and deception that they put out. I mean, it was unbelievable. You even need hip waders in that room last night with all the lies that Kaine came up with. But I think overall, Pence, especially on the very last part on the abortion thing and the right to life, I think overall he's a good guy. I don't agree with his stand on some issues, but compared to Clinton and Kaine, I mean, folks, you better get on the internet and get Trump in there, or we're doomed. But I appreciate your columns in the paper. I'm glad that they're actually working with you, because I mean, there's still only about 10% are conservative, constitutional oriented, and it's good to see the analysis that you have, and your background coming from the liberal East Coast over there is invaluable because that kind of philosophy has spread right here in this area, including a lot of our people. The governor, for some reason, I don't know where he's been getting his information, but we've got to get rid of the Common Core and some of the other things that are killing this state. And a third of our budget now, Bill, comes from the federal government. We don't have a balanced budget with in-state means. We just keep thinking that Uncle Sam, of course, those are our dollars. But anyway,
if Uncle Sam runs out of money, we're in serious trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Vote Trump. Thank you very much.
And I want to mention, not only am I in the newspaper this week, but our caller has a letter in there today echoing that very same sentiment, vote Trump. There's a great piece I'll get to later in the program, and it talks about how some people who claim they're conservative have really fallen under the spell of liberals in this country, and they buy into, that they got to be politically correct all the time. And I think that it afflicts a lot of Idaho Republicans as well. And unfortunately, we're not getting anything done, or we're not addressing certain issues because of it. You're on KLIX at 827. Go ahead.
Hey, Bill, I want to congratulate you on the column that you're writing on the paper. But please quit talking about your childhood. Oh, that's the column I've seen, dude. You're not like the old.
The problem is I don't understand anything you say,
oh my God,
especially when you get talking fast. Here's a couple of lessons. Slow down.
Same thing over and over and over again.
Slow down.
Oh my God, change that.
Slow down, and then if he spends a few more years here, he'll actually start thinking in English as well, and then be able to put a sentence together. 28 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Got a quick note I want to pass along today. If he's listening online, he couldn't yesterday because it was not our issue here on the local level, but the people we contract with had an issue with our live stream. But if he's listening at his office today, happy birthday to Dr. Michael J. DeLauro. He is still a few years younger than me, and I guess until I go to the great beyond, or wherever the heck I'm going. You notice I said heck. I'm hedging my bets. Wherever the heck I'm going, I got to just share with you very quickly. He's always going to be a few years younger than me, but I do want to wish him a happy birthday, and he's one of the all-time great radio guys that I've ever encountered. Coming up on 8:30 this morning, and I do want to point out, too, as well, we'll spend some time with the good folks from Trip Family Medicine in the next half hour. Signs of a heart attack. How do you know you're having one? Oh, I don't know. Anywhere you go at this day and age. Peggy Noonan wrote that great column a couple of months ago about how Americans are walking around just angry all the time. Because when you go have to deal with government bureaucrats, nothing seems to work there. You go shopping, or you go do anything online anymore, nothing seems to work. Your web stream goes down; it's beyond your control, and you just keep getting people giving you double talk whenever you try to bring it up and say, "Hey, how come this isn't working the way it's promised?" That's why we see people like Donald Trump winning Republican Party nominations, because people have just had enough. More on the way. Bill Colley with you at least until 10 o'clock this morning. Unless, of course, I succumb to a great heart attack because of all of that anger. It's always very possible, I suppose. If I've got to go out, though, this is the way I want to do it. Right now, it's 43. Oh, Lord help us.